I suspect most of you are here for our action item, which is 7.1, pertains to procedures relating to the formation of assessment districts. Who's giving the staff report?
I am, Mayor.
Okay.
So Emeryville is a charter city, and as such, a charter city may establish procedures relating to the formation of assessment districts, such as a property and business improvement district. Section 200 of Article 2 of the city's charter that was adopted this past November 2014 provides the city with the power over municipal affairs in relation to municipal revenues, including taxation and assessment. As a result, the proposed ordinance establishes procedures for the formation of property and business improvement assessment districts, which would supplement, not supplant, state law. So it would be adding some provisions that would be in addition to those that are provided by state law, which is set forth in the Streets and Highways Code 36600. This ordinance would establish authority for the city to invoke those state law procedures, and in addition to apply these procedures to residential property that would otherwise not be covered were the city to follow state law exclusively. By proceeding to form a property and business improvement district under the provisions of the proposed ordinance, the municipal code incorporates the state law and then specifies how the city council may choose to augment state law provisions. The city council would still be bound by and must comply with applicable state law governing the formation of property and business improvement districts in all other respects when forming in a district to fund improvements that provide special benefits to those properties assessed. So there will still be a protest ballot proceeding where affected property owners have the right to cast their vote for or against the proposed assessment. This proposed ordinance addresses 6 issues. First, in the area of formation of a district, Streets and Highways Code section requires 36621 requires the submission of a written petition signed by property owners and business owners who will pay at least 50% of the assessments proposed to be levied in order to initiate a proceeding. This proposed ordinance would allow the city council to initiate a proceeding by adoption of a resolution on its own motion, and also would allow for the assessment district proceeding to be initiated with the submittal of a petition signed by 30% of the properties to be assessed, as opposed to 50% that's under state law. Again, as I just indicated, the City Council must still conduct a protest proceeding in accordance with the California Constitution in order to form the district and levy assessments. Second, the proposed ordinance addresses the potential term of a assessment district. Streets and Highways Code allows the district to be formed for up to 10 years, whereas this proposed ordinance would allow the council to form the district for up to 15 years. Next addresses the issue of assessment of residential property. Existing law, and the PBID law, provides that property zoned solely for residential use may not be assessed. Notwithstanding this provision, there are some practitioners who believe that the constitutional requirements of Proposition 218 essentially trump the exception provided by the Streets and Highways Code, and thus mandate that property zone for residential use must be assessed in the formation of a PBID to the extent the residential property receives a special benefit. However, there was a recent trial court decision that analyzed the interplay of Proposition 218 with a similar type of exemption under the state water code with respect to a school district in a reclamation district assessment district. And that trial court held that Proposition 218 did not confer new authority to assess fees, and thus the court held that since the exemption for school districts under the water code predated the passage of Proposition 218, the school district remained exempt from the assessment under the provisions of the water code. Similarly, the PBID law was passed and predates passage of 218, so there's a similar argument that could be made. However, this is just a trial court case. It has no precedential value, and so there you have this vagueness in the law. And so the proposed ordinance would cut through this uncertainty and provide clear authority that the city can extend the assessment district to property that is zoned for residential use. Note that the city of San Francisco has, which is a charter city, has passed a similar ordinance providing for this same provision. Fourth, we would add some clarity, or not really clarity, but just make clear that the activities that can be funded under PBID include shuttle bus services such as the Emeryville round. And then fifth, this ordinance would provide that the assessment district can fund or provide recovery of costs that are expended in the formation of the district. And then finally, the ordinance also provides the council with the authority to disestablish a district by a supermajority vote for essentially any reason, as opposed to under the Streets and Highways Code, an assessment district can only be disestablished due to malfeasance, misappropriation of funds, or other violations of law. At this point, if the council adopts this proposed ordinance first reading, second reading would come back to you on April 7th, would be effective May 7th. Therefore, the staff would come back to you on June 2nd to propose a resolution to where the council would decide whether it wanted to proceed in the formation of the district in accordance with this ordinance. And then also it will adopt a resolution to essentially initiate the proceedings and establish a public hearing that we would suggest be set for July 21st so that the protest ballot proceeding could be held on that evening. And so at this point, that's all I have. And if you have any questions.
Are there any clarifying questions? Yeah.
Move to read by title only so we can start the process.
Clarifying question.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask staff to describe, if we were to pass this ordinance, what the protest ballot proceeding would look like roughly.
It would be the same as it currently is. Essentially, the engineer's report that would come to you on June 2nd would identify the proposed assessments. Those proposed assessments would be mailed. There would be a sort of a ballot that gets mailed out to all the affected property owners. Those ballots would have to be mailed at least 45 days in advance of the public hearing. So if the council adopted the resolution on June 2nd, and the public hearing was on July 21st, that's 49 days, so we would have a couple days to get those ballots mailed. And then when the hearing comes before you on July 21st, if there is a majority protest of those ballots submitted, and the majority protest is in relation to the amount of the assessment, not just sheer number, but the amount of assessment that those protest ballots represent. If it's more than 50%, then the council cannot adopt the assessment district. If it's less than that, then the city council may. It's still within the discretion of the council at that time to decide whether to form the district and levy the assessments.
Okay, and just to clarify for the public, we are not voting on a new PBID at the moment. We're still waiting for an engineer's report to propose a new PBID. What we're doing today simply smooths the way to make this all happen in a timely fashion, should we be satisfied with the engineer's report.
That's generally correct, yeah.
If I could just add that we did have the first community workshop on March 9th. There'll be another workshop on this Saturday, March 21st from 10 to 11:30 here in this chambers. There'll be a study session on May 19th, and we are hoping that there is the draft engineer's report and management plan available for that. Certainly we'll have the highlights of it, if not the entire report done. So there'll be another opportunity for the public to see it. We will also be sending out a postcard in early May, telling people that this will kind of look in the mail, it's going to be coming, so people will not just get the ballot in the mail and wonder what's going on, but they will have heard about it beforehand. And also staff also plans to do a series of community outreach meetings. We have one planned for Watergate already for March 30th. And we will be scheduling others as well. So this, what the city attorney said, is kind of the legalistic steps, but surrounding that there is a community outreach plan that staff is working on. And so by the time residents and business parcel owners, commercial and residential parcel owners receive those ballots, that hopefully they will have had plenty of opportunity to know what they're voting about.
I have a question. In all of these procedures, there's nothing really that specifies what would constitute the boundaries of this assessment district.
That would be in the management plan that would come to you. Certainly our jurisdiction extends to the city of Emeryville to levy the assessment, and then the management plan would also identify that as well.
Okay.
The
Any other
engineer's report.
questions from council?
No, I don't have
Right. There was a motion to read by title only. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Emeryville adding Chapter 9 to Title 3 of the Emeryville Municipal Code, establishing procedures relating to the formation of assessment districts.
All right. Public comment before we...
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. You may want to look at some other legal advice. What does it mean to add 15 more years? Why don't you at least have a few more hearings and find out whether anyone's interested in extending a PBID for 15 years? There's some question about the interpretation of a special benefit or a general benefit. I mean, a special benefit is something you get that's special, and a general benefit is something that applies to everybody. The service is available to everybody, and I think you're going to have a tough time proving that it's a special benefit. And also that it's a private system. I love when Karen says, well, we don't want to be a transit system, we have to comply with all those federal laws. Well, those federal laws give people rights. It gives you right to the planning of the routes, that service can't be cut, that handicapped access has to be there, that buses have, more than one door. There's a whole lot of rights that go with that, should be considered. And as well as a lot of other funding. There's a lot of funding for transit coming down the pike. I think the Emeryville is a transit system, and to say that it isn't is not being genuine. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Hello, Ron Freund. I'm from the Western District of Emeryville. And I was told you couldn't speak unless you wore green today. But apparently,
Got the memo. You got the memo.
I was misinformed, although I see Scott I think that's green, right? Yeah. So I just have a series of questions. Can they be responded to tonight, or will they be addressed? If I submit questions, how will they be addressed?
We have an opportunity to answer them tonight or at a later date, so it depends.
Okay. Well, let me just ask a few basic questions, probably reflecting my ignorance, and Mr. Biddle may be able to, or Karen, respond. What is the necessity of the timeline in terms of the renewal? Does it have to be done by July 21st? Is there any magic to the timeline? Given the issues surrounding the minimum wage, which are very large, is there a way we can move this back slightly and still meet the renewal date? Second question is somewhat related to what Ken said. How do we determine the special benefit when there are both residential and commercial properties along the same route? For example, the Powell Street route covers all of Watergate, but it also stops at the Towers, the Market, Trader Vic's, the Hong Kong restaurant, and now with the longer route, the Marina and the police station. How is that to be determined? How do you compute that? In the voting, my understanding is that it's weighted voting based on square footage. Can the PBID have other methods of weighting? Otherwise, would it not always be the case that business owners would be able to outvote residential owners, having the greater weight on being on their side? Will everyone be assessed, including single-family homes, rather than just multi-unit properties? Let's see. Are there any other kinds of fees that could be used as supplemental to the assessment, whereby businesses could, for example, provide bypasses, and get a tax deduction for their employees as a supplemental use for people that, for example, aren't residents of Emeryville? So these are some of the questions. If you can answer any of them, Michael or Karen, that'd be great.
I would just say that a lot of the questions that you're asking is part of the process by which the management plan is developed. The action here tonight simply sets the parameters by which a PBID assessment can be proposed and submitted to the parcel owners for consideration. So any of those, all those issues that you mentioned, none of that is being really addressed tonight, and is part of the process by which we get to a document that then would be put in front of the parcel owners. Having said that, a couple of questions are a special benefit and general benefit is determined by the assessment engineer, and the criteria that he's looking at really is a combination of accessibility to the service and trip generation. The more trips that your land use generates, kind of the more benefit that you get. It's not necessarily based upon actual use, it's upon accessibility. So, for example, you could have an office building that one year nobody is riding the Emeryville around, but the next year, 50% of the workers there are. The benefit to that commercial property owner is the same. And they're putting it in their brochures, and it's raising their property value, and it's providing that special benefit of the amenity, whether or not it's used or not. And so that's kind of to give you a sense of what the engineer looks like. But the management plan does have a section of it is just the assessment engineer's report, and the methodology that he uses will be laid out for everyone to see, and that's part of what you vote upon. The ballot will be sent to every parcel owner that would be subject to the PBID. So at this point, it's a citywide assessment. The proposal is for it to be both residents and for businesses. Again, This action today allows for that. It doesn't say that is in fact going to be the P-bid that is going to be proposed. And it would be based upon the value of the assessment. But even if less of a majority of the property owners consisting of less than 50% of the assessment returns say no, the city council ultimately has the authority, well, they can't approve it if the protest vote is no.
Right.
But it is in their authority to adopt it or not if it says yes. And so that is kind of a further protection under the law that provides the council with some independence on whether to go for it. So all of this will be part of the process. It'll be part of the community outreach. The management plan, the assessment engineer, I just seen some drafts of kind of his first take, and while it's an objective process, I mean, his assumptions are his assumptions, but you can certainly give him more information to help him refine his assumptions or her assumptions. So that piece of it will be probably one of the first things that will be done, because kind of everything, because a lot of other issues fall under, follow that, and that will be part of the discussion that we'll have with all parcel owners, both commercial and residential. So I think that kind of in general answers your question, but some of the specifics, I know this Saturday, if you can come, there's an opportunity to get a little bit more in depth, and also a lot of the questions that you have are ones that are part of the iterative process of developing the management plan to the point where it is ready to be considered by the parcel owners.
FAQs.
Oh, and there will be a frequently asked question coming out that I think that some of your kind of higher level questions in terms of just what's a P-bid, how is it voted, those kinds of things.
And could you speak about the weighting issue? Weighted vote?
Yes. An assessment district is based upon, the idea behind an assessment district that those that pay, essentially, that your vote is weighted by the amount that you pay. So if you are a small single parcel owner, you pay less assessment than a large multi-parcel owner, and so therefore it's the same vote, except that that one has kind of more pieces that is part of that vote. So people who, let's say, maybe own several parcels will get several ballots. You get kind of a ballot per parcel. And so some people will be getting, maybe could get 10 or 15, and some will be getting 1. So it is based upon the value of the assessment.
Public comment?
Yes, hi, I'm Fran Quittel. I live at 2 Commodore Drive, and I serve on the Finance Committee. And this is just sort of a transparency question so that everyone will clearly understand. I understand that you are talking about an assessment that's for residential, commercial, and business parcels. And I'm wondering, in the usage studies, how they flex, or how the assessments would flex for the heavy daytime population that comes in to work versus the residential population that uses the go-round at nights and weekends, so that the assessment is not just based on the parcel, but it's really based on who actually is served. And would the residents be paying their fair share, or would businesses be paying their fair share? And I think the study has to reflect these points quite transparently. That's my entire comment.
And the engineer's report does include the methodology that they use to determine the basis of the assessment in terms of special benefit, as well as any portion of the service that they cannot attribute a special benefit to. So, for example, there are people I have found out that take the Emeryville around, they get on at MacArthur BART and they get off at 40th and San Pablo to take AC Transit elsewhere. And we have some documentation that this in fact happens, and that's obviously not a benefit that could be attributed to any parcel in Emeryville. So that would be something that would be considered a general benefit, and that would be, that could not be paid from the assessment. It would have to be paid in another fashion, either by the city, by grants, some other way other than through the assessment district.
Come on up.
I just want to speak about this and just a host of other subjects here that regarding the basic concepts of governance, like what are we trying to do here with City Hall and governing here. Well, I think the basic idea here is what we're really trying to do is we're trying to address social and economic justice issues, because the weak among us and the powerless among us are sort of not represented, or their interests are not represented in the in the capitalist system that we have. And so the function of governance, I think the primary function is to represent those people's interests, the weak and the powerless, the dispossessed. So whenever you're trying to make decisions here, and this could go to the minimum wage or like in a PBID or anything, I think you should be, first of all, listening to, in this case with the city council, you should be listening to the residents, because they vote. Businesses don't vote, and so in that regard, they count for less. They don't even vote. They're not voting entities. Similarly, their interests don't really need to be looked out after, because they're not part of the group of the, since you're interested in social and economic justice, they're on the other side of the ledger there. So you're supposed to be looking out after the weak and the dispossessed and the people that are being harmed. So that's your primary function, I think. And so businesses should be listened to less, I think. And in addition, businesses have an ulterior motive, and that is the profit motive, which is fine that they're trying to make a profit, but it's not radical notion to bring up the idea that in chasing profits, that will color their rhetoric. And they'll get up before you, businesses, and they will either lie or misconstrue or conveniently forget things that would serve to help their bottom lines, their profits. So that's, you should always keep that in mind. I mean, that they are seeking profits, and so they should be listened to, I think, less. I think you should assume that they're seeking profits and that the money has a corrupting influence, and that's not a radical idea. So, insofar that the Constitution of California and the United States allows us to be able to represent, to look after social and economic justice issues and to represent the needy among us and the weak and the powerless, that's what we should be trying to do, I think. And that's our goal here at Emeryville City Hall and larger government. And so I just hope you always keep that in mind, that those are the people, your primary constituents. Thanks a lot.
Next.
Hi, John Bowders. First of all, happy St. Patrick's Day. My question is mostly for the city attorney. It's just, it's mostly a technical question. But in the case, in the California Constitution, and we have code related to school districts when it's a special district, and we have an oversight committee that's comprised of residents to oversee the expenditures that are made by that special assessment district. And so I know that the current PBID, the TMA oversees that, but I'm curious, depending on the scope of this, in particular, if this was to apply broadly to residents, or if not, and it was to be narrowed, I would be curious either to know one of two things: whether the statutes authorizing the creation of the special district, whether there's a mandatory requirement for a citizen oversight committee, as there are in the case of other special districts and parcel districts assessment taxes, and if not, what is the accountability metric for residents? I think, speaking to the questions that were asked, I understand we're at the very beginning stage of the process, so it's not necessary to fully evaluate what that needs to look like, but I'm just curious what the possible accountability metrics are. Thanks.
Do you want to respond?
Sure. So there is no requirement under PBID for the formation of a citizens oversight. There is, however, a need for the city to enter into an agreement with the TMA for the administration of the Emeryville round, and it's in that document that the city can require certain provisions in there to make sure that the board that's representing the overall district, which comprised now of businesses initially, but it'll be businesses and residents should we get to that point, then that agreement can sort of dictate some of the composition of that oversight board. So the council will have the ability to give input and pass on that document.
Thank you. Not seeing any more public comment. I'll close public comment and have a last round at council discussion.
Yeah, Mayor Atkin, I think Ron has brought forward some very good questions, and questions that I have heard from other members of the community. And Ron sent me an email on this, and I would hope that Saturday at the public meeting that we would address these questions in a more thorough manner and incorporate some of them into the frequently asked questions. Hopefully that will be sent out to people. So I'm going to pass this down to Karen. Does the council agree with me on this, that we should expand on the answers to these questions?
I think
on
so.
Saturday?
I think that staff is saying too, though, that we're waiting for the management report to fully understand what.
Well, that can
fully
be done,
understand those.
but at least
But I agree, Nora. Yeah.
it gives people an idea of what some of the basic concerns are out there. And thank you, Ron. That was very well done.
All right, so we've introduced a motion to read by title only. We've taken public testimony.
I move the first reading of the ordinance.
A second? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, please call the roll.
Councilmember Asher.
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue.
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Davis.
Aye.
And Mayor Atkin.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you all. Moving on